Yes.
Alright. I'm going to be refuting a speech that was given by that was given about zoo animals and how they can die prematurely or suffer in zoos. And his three main points were that animals in captivity suffer, animals in captivity are taught unnecessary tricks to entertain us, and that animals being treated well in zoos can still suffer great amounts. And he states that animals are not well taken care of in zoos. But in most, if not all zoos, there are zookeepers and vets that are working like 24/7, so that no matter what happens to any animal, they can take care of them right away. And they also give them regular checkups to make sure they're all right, and they feed them nutritional balanced meals every day. And in those meals, the zoos usually give them medications to help them with whatever problem they're having. And he also states that they can suffer psychological distress, which is true to some extent. Most animals usually adjust pretty quickly to it, and if they don't, then the zoos take them out of the like the display, and then they put them in the back kind of room, and then they try and treat them there. And if an animal shows behavioral changes that indicate psychological distress, they just take them out and try and rehabilitate them, and if that doesn't work, then they just kind of put them back in the wild. He also states that animals forget or lose their ability to survive in the wild. I read on SeaWorld's and San Diego Zoo's websites that most of the animals that they get are either already bred in the zoos or they're rescued from the wild, like if they get injured or caught in a net or they're endangered species or something like that, then they'll take them in and treat them and then put them on the exhibits or something like that. And in most cases, they live in captivity their entire lives, so they never really go back to the wild, so it doesn't matter if they lose their instincts. I also read on allexperts.com that animals in zoos generally live longer than they do in the wild. Someone asked a question on that website, what are the advantages or disadvantages of having animals that live in zoos? And an expert by the name of Jonathan Wright answered it. He has a BSc degree in zoology, and he is a volunteer at the London Zoo. Zoos help increase the population size of endangered animals by breeding them together. A lot of times they don't even have to be the same zoo. They can send eggs or semen to other zoos and then impregnate animals like that. And just because an animal lives in the wild doesn't mean that its life is any better than it would be in a zoo, because there is competition out in the wild. And he says that animals are being trained without their consent to do things, but the way I see it, when they take some kind of treat or food from the trainer, then that's basically them consenting. If I do this, then you give me the food. And he says that they won't need to do any of the things that they're taught in the wild, but a lot of times those things that they do are things that they already do in the wild, and they're just replicating it for us to see. The advocate's third point was that the space is too confined. Animals that breed in zoos don't know how to take care of their young, and that animals lose their natural instincts. Many zoos build habitats specifically designed for the animals that live in them, and there's usually enough room for them. Animals that live in zoos spend their entire life in zoos or sanctuaries, so it's not a big deal about losing their instincts. And let's see what else. When animals live in the wild, sometimes they might not get food for days because they can't find something to eat, or something bigger comes in and takes it away. And at least in zoos, they get fed every day. And what zoos also do to try and help them out is they hide the food in places that are hard to get to, so that they can look for it and exercise to get to it. So basically, the animals live in a habitat similar to where they come from. They get nutritional food daily, medications when they need it, regular checkups. They get plenty of care and usually live longer, healthy lives. So animals in zoos don't suffer any more in captivity than they would in the wild from lack of food or from rivalries between other animals.
All right, you labeled the claims, the secondary claims at least pretty clearly. You seemed a little uncertain about what the main proposition of the advocate was, but you seem to know the general direction in which you're going on these points. The first point, your clearest argument, is the counterclaim on the zoos caring and providing all these benefits, the animals' vets, regular checkups, and so on and so forth. No evidence on this point, so it's all an assertion on your part, and that doesn't seem like it would be something very hard to provide some data on. That if there is, for instance, a standard procedure that zoos are required to adhere to in order to get licensed by the governments that where the zoos exist, or to be members of international organizations that other zoos would recognize, that would also add to the credibility of that particular argument. Same problem with the psychological distractions. You say they try to minimize them. You know, they take the animals out of the exhibits, or they rehabilitate them, and if that doesn't work, then they return them to the wild. And I don't have any information on this at all. I don't even have an example to support this, much less an authority or any statistics to indicate that that's a typical sort of behavior. So they're claims, but they are assertions, and there's no data on them. On the next point, I thought, though, that you were doing a lot better job, because you did come back and talk about how the animals that are in zoos are either bred or they're rescued out of the wild. Their need for maintaining their instincts is minimized because they lead their lives the whole time in the zoos, and you had a source citation on that that explained that whole process. You gave that source some credibility, and then you kind of summarized the whole argument there pretty effectively. That says wild does not automatically equal better, which, by the way, would be a counterclaim. Now, I did appreciate the idea of competition in the wild, and perhaps longevity is going to be problematic, but we didn't get any data on the longevity issue, and so as a consequence, it's again one of those things that's asserted. When you talked about the being trained without their consent issue, I thought that was kind of interesting. He said, hey, they took the food, they're consenting. That sounds like a value argument. It's a reasonable point to make. I don't know exactly how an animal consents to being trained. I signed a contract that says it's okay to train me. So I thought that was a pretty reasonable challenge there. I like the argument better that says that the behaviors that they're doing are basically behaviors that they're replicating from the wild. Again, that's something that some evidence on would probably be appropriate for. All right, and then basically you summarize the argument pretty clearly at the end, so we get one last chance to know exactly what your point was. Thank you.